Introduction to Dayue Ballad. Have you ever fallen in love with gods? Sir Shao Siming, has she traveled again? Oh no, it's a rebirth. Lin Baoyue, who was in a car accident in modern times, woke up to find herself wearing the body of the goddess Shao Siming, who was buried under the Qin Mausoleum in her previous life. Past history is shrouded in mist and darkness, past and present lives are shrouded in mystery, and I have become an unlucky princess. The empire is shattered, 7 countries stand tall, and chaotic times come again. That night, Ying Baoyue sat up from the coffin and began the legend of women in the Warring States period. The background of this article is fictional. Chapter 1. Imperial Mausoleum. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That is a vast expanse of stars beneath the darkness and sun. Mercury is the sea, and stars are the sky. A magnificent palace. The giant pillar rises from the sky, and countless palaces are arranged in rows, more luxurious than all palaces in the world. However, such a magnificent palace is actually located underground. This is an underground palace. This is a tomb. A magnificent tomb with countless accompanying burial objects. Looking down at this imperial tomb from a high place, it seems as if one is looking at the most luxurious miracle in human history. Because in this palace, there are mountains, rivers, and the sun, moon, and stars. Using Mercury as the source of all rivers and oceans, it is infused with mechanical elements, with astronomy at the top and geography at the bottom. Using mermaid paste as a candle, it will last for a long time. On the zenith adorned with countless gemstones, the 20.8 constellations are dazzling and dazzling. On the ground, obsidian laid out the map of a vast empire, and 2 tall candles made of whale fat burned brightly, side by side on the golden avenue. At the end of the avenue is an ocean of mercury. There is a high platform in the center of the Mercury Sea, on which stands a huge bronze coffin like a house. Everything is as it was when this tomb was first built, and the owner of this tomb will gain eternal life in this underground world. However, something that did not exist in the blueprint suddenly appeared next to the bronze coffin. That is a small path paved with white jade, and 2 commoners are walking on this path with fear on their faces. Every step they take, Mercury engulfs their path, carrying a black coffin in their hands. This coffin is of unknown material, extremely dark, and the most eerie thing is that the surface of the pitch-black coffin still has dark red patterns flowing. Like vines spreading all over the surface of the coffin. 2 commoners carried this coffin towards the bronze giant coffin in the center of the Mercury Sea. Do you really want her to be buried together? At this moment, an elderly voice sounded in the sky, and at the only opening of the dome stood 2 people, black and white. Watching the old man trembling as he placed the black small coffin next to the bronze giant coffin, the old man in white slowly spoke up. Another middle-aged man in black looked down at the vast and profound underground palace, his gaze as deep as ink. This is the last sentence of the king before his death. His gaze fixed on the black coffin covered in dark red spells, and he said in a low voice. Only in this way can we keep her here. The people's screams of terror came from the ground, and at the moment when the black coffin was set, the mercury on the ground suddenly began to rise. The people in black and white took a step back and stood at the top of the mountain, lifting their hands. In the desperate gaze of the people, the only opening on the dome slowly closed under an invisible force. As he watched the black coffin gradually disappear into the depths of the underground palace, engulfed by mercury, the man in black wriggled his lips and whispered softly. Goodbye. The eternal goddess. The 2 servants let out their last mournful scream, and mercury flooded in, overwhelming everything. The enclosed underground fell into a dead silence. A long, long time has passed. I don't know how long it has been. In the quiet and deep underground palace. The flame of the never-ending mermaid candle suddenly shook. The wave of mercury seemed to be pulled away by a force, quietly revealing the white jade path. At the end of the path, there were no more people, and a black shadow quietly emerged from the water. A black coffin emerged from the sea of mercury, and everything around it was completely corroded except for this coffin, which remained unchanged, as if time had frozen and stopped forever. And the next moment, the dark red pattern on the surface of the black coffin suddenly lit up. Twinkle, twinkle, a strange red light flickers. At this moment, in the forever sealed and static underground world, a voice rang out. The surface of the mercury sea rippled, and the flames of the mermaid candle became even hotter and swayed, highlighting the sudden sound that appeared. The sound coming from the coffin. Who am I? The intense gasping sound echoed in the girl's ear, like a deep-sea suffocation that made her want to grab her throat. In the infinite pain, endless questions swirled in her mind. Where am I? Countless noisy voices rang in her ears, stirring up her blurry memories. Women as gods will inevitably disrupt the heavenly way. Minger, live well. You despicable person who harms the country and the people. Go to hell. Under the sacrificial pillar, countless shadows flashed before her eyes, and before she could see the truth, thick mercury surged towards her, overwhelming her. Ah! In the darkness, Lin Baoyue suddenly opened her eyes. She took a cold breath and instinctively wanted to sit up, but the next moment she realized she couldn't control her body. What's going on? Where is this? She remembers that she seems to have dead. After taking 3 big breaths, Lin Baoyue finally stopped the vortex in her brain and the auditory hallucinations in her ears. She stared blankly at the infinite darkness, feeling as if she had seen something terrifying just now, but once she woke up, she couldn't remember anything. The only thing she can remember is the moment before when she was just hit by a speeding truck on the road. Today is the day when Lin Baoyue finished her college entrance examination. However, just as she was crossing the road on her way home after the exam, a truck ran a red light. What's even more terrifying is that a child has already walked onto the road. Lin Baoyue's last memory was when she pushed the child away and collided with the truck. Then there was no more. Lin Baoyue twitched her fingers slightly and widened her eyes in the darkness. That thing is still there. During the collision, she touched a piece of red jade that was inexplicably embedded on the front crossbar of the car, and then disappeared into the world. At this moment, the touch of her fingertips revealed that the piece of red jade was still held in her palm. I don't know if due to twisting, the ruby suddenly emitted a slight light, illuminating the darkness slightly. Lin Baoyue struggled to wriggle her head, wanting to see where she had been hit and flown. The next moment, when she saw everything around her, she felt like she was in an ice cellar. She is in a secret space, and the size of this space seems to be tailor-made for her, just like a coffin. Lin Baoyue restrained her chest heaviness and returned to lying flat, staring blankly ahead. She is actually lying in a coffin at this moment. No, she was nailed to death in a coffin. This shocking fact left Lin Baoyue's mind blank, but it's not over yet. The next moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came to her ear. In the dark space, footsteps were heard. With a sharp and murderous aura. Chapter 2. Shao Siming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The fact that a living person has been nailed to death in a coffin is enough to be terrifying, and the sound of footsteps coming from the infinite silence underground is already enough to scare people to death. That's right, underground. Although Lin Baoyue has just regained consciousness, she has already made a judgment on the environment around her. She is currently in a coffin, which is likely buried underground or in an underground palace. Lin Baoyue believes that the latter is more likely, as she is unlikely to be buried in the soil because she did not smell the soil. She has been very sensitive to her surroundings since she was very young. Although the smell told her that she was not buried in the soil, thanks to this sensitivity, a bad feeling arose in her heart at this moment. Lin Baoyue doesn't know what it would be like for a normal person to find herself nailed to a coffin. After all, she has been told since childhood that she doesn't look like a normal person when faced with things. But even if she is not considered a normal person, she knows that the current situation is very abnormal. The sound of footsteps coming from her ear is very light. If her hearing is not affected by the collision, then the footsteps are still quite far away from her. Based on this, it can also be inferred how large the space she is in. Very big. Unfortunately, although the distance was far, it was enough to tell that the owner of the footsteps was coming towards her. The sound was two people, seemingly carrying something heavy. Their footsteps were unusually light, and if it weren't for that heavy object, she might not have even noticed it. As if hesitating about something, the footsteps kept going and stopping. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The stealthy footsteps. It was hard for Lin Baoyue to believe that these two people were coming to save her when such a voice came from the mysterious and lifeless underground. Unable to judge the good or evil of the newcomer, she can only find ways to save herself. To save oneself, one must start by understanding the current situation. Lin Baoyue took a deep breath and tried to stroke the ruby in her hand again. Just as she was thinking about the current situation, she tried to move her body and found that although she couldn't sit up, her hands, feet, and neck could still move. But the only parts that can move are the wrists, ankles, and above the shoulders. Simply put, one can only move their fingers, toes, and head. The other parts are tightly attached to the bottom of the coffin, like pouring lead. Since she can feel other parts of her body, it means that the body itself has not lost consciousness. The reason why she cannot move is because Lin Baoyue suddenly had a bold idea. Accompanied by her speculation, the originally pitch-black top of the coffin emitted a faint red light. Lin Baoyue opened her eyes wide and looked at the eerie light flowing like blood, with countless vine-like lines spreading before her eyes. Is this formation? When this sentence appeared in her mind, Lin Baoyue herself was surprised. Why does she know this? She had never seen these patterns before the college entrance examination, but just in an instant, she instinctively revealed the answer in her heart. She still has an indescribable feeling that the answer that emerges in her heart is true. These patterns reflect her previous speculation. Her physical body was firmly bound in this coffin by some kind of formation. But why? Lin Baoyue furrowed her brows and rubbed her fingertips against the red jade. She didn't believe that there was a mysterious force in this world, but she didn't understand why this force had brought her into a coffin. That's right, it's just transportation. Modern children who have read a lot of online literature may think that they have encountered supernatural phenomena such as teleportation or adventure. But in Lin Baoyue's opinion, the teleportation she encountered could not even be considered. 1 second after the collision, the next second after waking up, she was in the coffin. It sounded mysterious, but people couldn't feel time when they were unconscious. As long as they moved to this coffin and closed it when she was knocked unconscious, they could unconsciously create this effect. Whether it's time traveling or teleportation, it's impossible for everyone to encounter her. She's just an ordinary college student who didn't have her parents since childhood and only had the opportunity to participate in the college entrance examination with the support of a welfare institution. She doesn't even qualify for a kidnapping ticket, probably because someone picked up her body on the roadside and got involved in some accident unexpected. In calm thinking, Ying Baoyue suddenly opened her eyes wide. The wider you open, the bigger you become. Dong dong dong. Her heart suddenly throbbed violently, and the sound even drowned out the distant footsteps. For her, who is praised by her classmates as an inhuman calm, this is the most intense beat of her life. Because just as the deep red pattern on the coffin was getting brighter, Lin Baoyue saw her face. No, correctly speaking, it is the face that was originally the same as her. This is not a novel plot or a dream. Lin Baoyue took a deep breath and clenched the ruby at her fingertips. It's a mirror. The coffin lid, which was pressed against her cheek, was adorned with an extremely smooth polished copper mirror, with red patterns crisscrossing it. Her face appeared to be shattered and separated only when reflected in it. The face was familiar to Lin Baoyue, even more beautiful than her familiar face, but what almost stopped her breathing just now was the clothes reflecting on this body in the full-body mirror. The girl lying in the coffin was not wearing her familiar blue and white school uniform, but a dress with extremely intricate and antique craftsmanship. Saying it is antique and even inaccurate, this dress is different from any female lead dress she sees in ancient dramas, revealing an extremely special atmosphere. An ancient and mysterious aura. It's like appearing in ancient murals, ancient and solemn clothing. With this terrifying speculation, Lin Baoyue widened her eyes as she discovered that rows of seal script were still engraved above the bronze mirror. This is, Autumn orchids embrace elk, and Luo Xing descends from the hall. The green leaves are pure and beautiful, and the fragrance is fragrant and beautiful, inheriting them. Sadness, no sorrow, no separation, no joy, no new acquaintance. With a long sword, embrace young Ai, and son alone, be a righteous citizen. There are 13 rows in total. This poem seems to be engraved in the soul of Lin Baoyue. She knows what this is. This is the Chu Ci. Chu Ci. Shao Siming, Shao Siming. With this name floating in her mind, Lin Baoyue seemed to be hit hard, her heart churning with countless shattered images appearing in her mind, and at the same time, the voice before awakening sounded. It turned out that it wasn't her hallucination, it was a fragment of memories that once belonged to her. Her past life, the memory left by the true owner of this body. Looking at the crazy faces under the sacrificial pillar in her memory, Lin Baoyue finally remembered seeing such a scene before. At this moment, she finally remembered who she was. She returned to her past life. And the person who was suppressed in this coffin in her past life is. She is, Shao Siming. Goddess, young master of destiny. However, other than that, Lin Baoyue couldn't remember how she was locked in this coffin, and just as her head was about to crack, the sneaky footsteps finally reached her side. Why is there still a coffin here? It's different from what was painted on the blueprint. A rough voice sounded outside the coffin. It's broken. Lin Baoyue's forehead in the coffin was oozing with cold sweat. She was immersed in the shock of her own identity and forgot about the crisis outside. Silence. Another sharp but suppressed voice sounded. It's not suitable to stay here for a long time. Even if there is a talisman from Lord Su, our chest will rot in more than half an hour. We only have 15 minutes left. Don't worry about the rest, don't forget what we're here for. The person with a rough voice immediately became nervous upon hearing this and said, "Okay, let's start quickly." The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground was heard, and the two of them put down their belongings. The sharp sound echoed again. If it weren't for that which guarding the descendants of the Ying family, we wouldn't have taken such a big risk. With a click, it seemed that the lid of something had been lifted, and the person gasped for breath. It's really. Your Royal Highness Princess. It's just a surviving orphan girl, screamed the person in a sharp voice. Her brother didn't even want the national constitution to sell her and seek honor. What's there to be afraid of? But. After all, this is the bloodline of His Majesty Taizu. The rough-voiced person swallowed his saliva and stuttered, "Is it really? Can you really kill her by using this formation here?" "It's better to say that you can only try it here," the sharp-voiced person said coldly. "After all, this is the only place in the legend that can isolate the human gods from protecting the descendants of the Ying family." Human gods. Lin Baoyue, who was inside the coffin on one side, felt a sudden change in her heart when she heard this word. What exactly is all this, however? Before she could recall what the word meant, the sharp voice continued to speak. "This piece of paper was left by that witch. I don't know if I can kill Ying Hanri in 7 years, the person said proudly, but kill your Majesty's sister." He paused and said the name that shook Lin Baoyue's heart and soul inside one side of the coffin. Killing Ying Baoyue is more than enough. Lin Baoyue widened her eyes. Ying Baoyue. Who? Chapter 3. Ying Baoyue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ying Baoyue. Although I don't know if the writing style is the same, Lin Baoyue thinks it should be those two words. Embrace the moon. The same name as yourself. Different surnames, the same first name. Ying Baoyue. Upon hearing this name, Lin Baoyue's head immediately began to ache violently, and the next moment an elderly voice rang in her ear. Hao reported yesterday that she had given birth to a daughter, and I have an additional granddaughter. I gave her the same name as you. If I don't get you, at least I need to leave your name and see if she can grow into a woman like you. The old voice lingered in Lin Baoyue's ear like a spell, and she could only listen to everything in a daze. Because she knew it was a memory of her past life. Her memories from her past life are like sand sleeping beneath the water, some with no signs of recovery, but others can be pried and partially revived with just one stimulating point. The name of Ying Baoyue was a stimulating point that restored some of her memory. Although I have never seen this child, the girl who was given the same name as her previous life is indeed someone she knows. Lin Baoyue has always been called Lin Baoyue. When she was still in this world in her previous life, she was also called Lin Baoyue as a young master. This world is called the Shanhai continent. The old man who had just spoken in her ear, the grandfather of Princess Ying Baoyue, was the one who changed this continent. This continent was originally a chaotic land, with demons rampant and people struggling to make a living. In times of chaos, heroes emerged, and in this chaos, a young man named Ying Di appeared. He traveled south and north to search for gods and established a cultivation system to communicate with them. In the end, he found 8 gods in this continent and received their help. After a long war of hegemony, Emperor Ying, as the first emperor of Qin, unified the continent and established the Pengda Qin Empire, which spanned the continent. This is the legendary story of the first hegemonic emperor of the Shanhai continent, Emperor Ying. And Ying Baoyue is the granddaughter of this hegemon and the second daughter of Ying Hao, the youngest son of Emperor Ying. That's all for Lin Baoyue's restored memory. And the two of them, with their voices rising and falling in her ears, continued to murder the imperial princess. Hurry up! Hurry up! The effect of the overpowering drug is about to pass, quickly set up the formation. The sharp-voiced person shouted in panic. It will be ready soon. Just use the spirit fire to light this paper and aim it at the body of Royal Highness Princess. The rough-voiced man shook his throat and shouted. The spiritual fire given by Lord Su. The spiritual fire. Listening to the conversation outside, Lin Baoyue's eyes inside the coffin grew colder and colder. Just outside her coffin, someone is killing someone. She didn't know what had happened in Daqin. Princess Guiwe's Ying Baoyue would end up like this, even being pulled out for a marriage. She didn't know how many years she had been in the coffin, but since it was a marriage, the little princess in her memory was at best only in her teens. A teenage girl like a flower was killed by someone beside her, and she could only listen helplessly. Neither Lin Baoyue nor Shao Siming could accept such a thing. Lin Baoyue took a deep breath and vigorously moved her body. Instead of sitting in a sealed coffin and waiting to die, she would at least struggle desperately. Even if she couldn't save the girl outside, she wouldn't want to listen like this anymore. Although she hasn't figured out who she is yet, there's one thing she knows very well. She didn't want to see the princess die. However, the two people outside the coffin did not know if the ceremony had reached a crucial step and did not respond to the commotion caused by Lin Baoyue. Lin Baoyue tightly grasped the red jade in her palm, closed her eyes, lifted her still-moving head, and fiercely collided with the coffin. Puff! Like the sound of a blister being punctured, Lin Baoyue, who had originally realized by banging her head, relaxed all over and opened her eyes in a daze. The pupils contract. The anticipated excruciating pain did not come, and her body was no longer heavy like lead. More importantly, before her eyes was no longer the cramped coffin, but a world so vast and mysterious that it was indescribable. Mercury is the sea, and stars are the sky. Did she come out? Lin Baoyue lowered her head in confusion and looked at the black coffin with a familiar pattern on the ground. The red light on the surface pattern of the black coffin seems to have dimmed a bit, but the top cover is still tightly closed. Wait. Close tightly. Lin Baoyue looked at her hand in astonishment, then looked at her semi-transparent arm in silence. She looked around and then looked down at the two black-clothed people who were unconsciously arranging the formation and reciting words, feeling mixed for a moment. She came out, but it wasn't her person who came out. This eerie black coffin seems to have an absolute constraint on her physical body. So what came out was her soul. So she used all her strength to hit the coffin and knocked herself out of her soul. Lin Baoyue suppressed the urge to cover her forehead and quickly looked at the ground. She didn't forget why her soul had to come out of her body. The little princess, go to hell. Accompanied by a vicious roar, Lin Baoyue's heart and mind were shaken. That was just a very short moment. But she didn't catch up. It's better to say she's just a soul and can't do anything. There was indeed another open coffin beside the black coffin that bound Lin Baoyue's body, inside which lay a young girl in a simple dress. She fell asleep peacefully with her eyes closed, as if she had been placed in this coffin at the moment of going to bed. However, her tranquility was contrasted with the complex and ferocious array beneath the coffin. This is a killing formation. Two masked black-clothed men stood on the left and right sides of the killing formation, who were the masters of the sharp and rough voices that Lin Baoyue had heard before. The person with a sharp voice has a print on their hand, while the person with a rough voice holds a red paper in their hand. All the ominous aura comes from this red paper. It's just a piece of paper, but it feels like it's soaked in blood, with circles of dark red light patterns constantly wandering around the edges. Just like living. At the moment she saw that, Lin Baoyue's heart began to beat violently, and a voice like an alarm bell kept shouting in her heart. Never ignite it. However, everything was too late, and in the moment she saw it, the paper was ignited. The spirit fire of Lashizi, which the person with a rough voice had been reciting countless times, finally ignited. The red lotus of hell ignited, and an unimaginable aura of death instantly swept through the ground. Even the sea of water and silver retreated in fear. The rough voice person sifted through the bran all over, as if afraid of being scalded, and desperately threw the burning red paper towards the princess inside the coffin. The next moment, Lin Baoyue closed her eyes. The curse has been activated. The ominous curse still hitting Baoyue inside the coffin. The air was filled with a creaking sound like a soldering iron, and Lin Baoyue, who was floating in the air, watched helplessly as the little princess, who had previously closed her eyes peacefully, suddenly opened her eyes and painfully widened them. Ah, cough. The princess in the coffin opened her mouth but couldn't make a sound. The girl had already reached the end of her life before realizing what had happened. Fear, shock, and despair flowed in her eyes, as if her whole body was bound and shattered by dark red chains that were rapidly eroding her life. Ha ha ha, indeed successful. Does it hurt, little princess? Don't worry, you're about to die. Amidst the insane laughter of two black-clad men by the coffin, Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net, Lin Baoyue coldly gazed at the back of their heads. The aura of this curse was so strong that it was unimaginable. She knew she was powerless to stop the red lotus-like curse, but at least she had to do her best. However, just as Lin Baoyue was about to do something, her spirit suddenly stiffened in the air. Although I don't know if my soul feels anything, Lin Baoyue did feel a chill. Because she felt someone take a glance at her. Lin Baoyue slowly lowered her head and met the princess lying in the coffin with 4 eyes. The scene was very quiet for a moment, with only the voices of the two black-clothed people laughing on their own echoing in the empty underground palace. And Lin Baoyue floating in the air and Ying Baoyue in the coffin looked at each other. Princess Ying Baoyue, who is about to die, can see her. This is legend has it that people can see the existence of their souls when they are about to die. It's actually true. Lin Baoyue looked at her little princess as if she was looking for a life-saving straw in the last second of her life, and took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Lin Baoyue said to her. She couldn't do anything for her. Ying Baoyue in the coffin moved her lips, as if wanting to say something. The little princess stiffly reached out her hand in mid-air, as if trying to grab something. However, she couldn't say a word in the end. She's dead. Lin Baoyue stared blankly at the little princess holding her hand stiffly in the coffin, her mind blank. This child is really dead. This child with the same name as her is really like this. However, the next moment, a strong force suddenly struck in mid-air, pulling her into the body. Chapter 4. Freshmen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hello. Before Lin Baoyue could figure out what had happened, the heart-wrenching pain came from all four limbs. It felt as if my whole body was wrapped in burning red wire, scorching and piercing. This is the real physical pain. Lin Baoyue's eyes darkened, but when she opened them again, she stared blankly at the fierce and crazy eyes of the two black-clothed people above her head. The two masked faces were on top of her own head. Lin Baoyue's perspective has changed from floating in the sky to lying on the ground. Is that so? Thinking of the strong force that had just pulled her over out of thin air, Lin Baoyue lay in another coffin again, enduring a burning pain all over her body, slowly exhaling a breath. Just now, the little princess named Ying Baoyue glanced at her at the last moment of her death. Then Lin Baoyue was pulled into this body. Lin Baoyue turned her head slightly, wanting to look outside at the other coffin. After all, her original body was still there. Oh, why are you still angry? The sharp-voiced person was looking at the young girl in the coffin who hadn't died yet, but suddenly another black-clothed man shouted like a pig in the underground palace. Big adults. What's wrong? The sharp voice shouted impatiently, but the next moment a strange red light climbed onto his cheek, and he looked stiff to the side. Looking at another dark coffin suddenly glowing red. Lin Baoyue beside her also widened her eyes. Looking at the eerie scene around me. Just as her divine soul entered Princess Ying's body, the blood-colored pattern on the black coffin that had originally sealed her suddenly emitted a dazzling red light. It's on fire. The so-called spiritual fire that just hit Ying Baoyue's coffin also ignited on the black coffin next to it at some point. Lin Baoyue remembers clearly that the black coffin was not originally lit, but suddenly it caught fire. Is it because my soul has left? Lin Baoyue looked sideways at the eerie red patterns still emanating from the coffin lid in the flames and clenched her fists. In the midst of the red lotus, the radiance of the pattern is stronger and ominous than flames. And the next moment, something even more eerie happened. The rough voice of the person screamed in terror, breaking through the silence. How could the spiritual fire become like this? Lin Baoyue's pupils contracted. The flames burning on the black coffin suddenly turned green. The green flames burned underground, like the eyes of ancient giants. This is a scene so eerie that it can freeze everyone's heart. And the originally peaceful Mercury Sea suddenly surged with the green flames. The entire underground palace trembled in an instant. This is. The once proud and arrogant black-clothed man now turned into a statue in the storm, with an uncontrollable fear in his eyes. Duh. Your Excellency. What exactly is this black coffin? The rough-voiced person was about to soften to the ground, while the sharp-voiced person grabbed him but his voice trembled uncontrollably. A few years ago, I heard a rumor. But all practitioners treat it as crazy. The person's eyes were wide open, as if they had seen the most terrifying thing in the world, and their voice was deep and ethereal. Under His Majesty Taizu's tomb, it seems that there is someone buried. The man swallowed heavily and trembled as he spoke. It is said that the eternal goddess is buried. With the exit of this title, the person in the rough voice froze all over. Eternal goddess. How could it be? Not really. Looking at the green flames, a huge fear suddenly rose in the eyes of the two black-clothed people. At this moment, Mercury surged up again and forced towards their feet like alive. Ah! Your Royal Highness Princess is dead anyway. Let's go. The two black-clothed people looked at each other and jumped up like flames, only to hear a clang. Lin Baoyue's eyes turned black, and the two hurriedly covered her face with the coffin. The next moment, the pungent burnt smell hit her again. Throw all the remaining spiritual fire onto it, and there's no residue left from the burning, so there's no need to confirm the body. Mercury is here, hurry up. Sir. Wait for me. The chaotic footsteps rushed away, creating a hurricane. The figures of the two black-clothed men disappeared. In the underground palace where stars are the sky and Mercury is the sea, next to a huge bronze coffin. The green flames were quietly burning. The red light on the black coffin, which seemed to have lost its vitality, gradually faded away. Finally, with a loud bang, the coffin was completely burned down and turned into ashes. The red lotus on the other coffin on the side gradually extinguished, and the coffin originally made of golden nanmu was burned into a pile of slag. A pile of slag. Slag. The faint light of the stars, inlaid with gemstones and clear jade, shone on two piles of ashes, silent, indifferent, and desolate. In the empty underground, all sins will be buried, leaving behind forever. Forever. Wow. At this moment, a sudden sound reappeared underground. The originally larger pile of slag was suddenly arched into a bag, and a handful of black ash protruded from the slag. Underground. Black-gray. One hand. The dead and silent underground. Someone lifted the coffin and stood up. I didn't expect my previous life title to be so scary. Accompanied by the girl's murmur, a gray-white figure pushed open the burnt coffin board and sat up silently. Gray is the gray of black and gray, and white is the white of a girl's body. The girl reached out her hand and lowered her head, looking at her bare arm. The clothes on this body have all been burned. She touched her head and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, my hair is still there. Otherwise, it would really make people bald. However, the next moment, there was a sudden sharp pain in her left wrist. Looking at the only color on her body, Lin Baoyue's pupils shrank. Red scars, like dazzling gemstones, enveloped the girl's wrist. Scars seemed to penetrate deep into the bone marrow, like a soldering iron tightening her pulse. Lin Baoyue instinctively realized that this was the formation that had taken away the life of the original owner of this body, but now it stayed on her body in this form. Stay. Her body. Lin Baoyue stood up from the ashes and looked at another pile of ashes beside her, silent. That was her original body and the coffin that sealed her, but by now it had turned into ashes, and she didn't even know why. She just put on her body from her past life, and then her original body was burned. It was burned. It's really hard to know what to say. However, looking at the pile of ashes, Lin Baoyue sighed slightly. Although she lost her memory, she understood that her previous life's murder was closely related to this black coffin. The seal of this black coffin on her body was absolute, and it remained unopened until it was burned to ashes. If it weren't for accidentally entering the body of this little princess, she might have been trapped in that black coffin for the rest of her life and couldn't get out. Perhaps the person who sealed her did not expect that she would return to the world in such a way. Just Lin Baoyue looked at the unfamiliar white and tender palm. She lifted her head to look at the vast underground palace, her gaze fixed on the huge bronze coffin, her gaze deep. Her original body has been destroyed. So far. She had no choice but to live as Ying Baoyue. Thinking of the unspoken mouth shape of the little princess on her deathbed, Lin Baoyue murmured, freedom. I'm afraid the last wish of the married princess is, live freely. Since she inherited her body, as long as her face remains unchanged, she can only fully accept her identity, Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net, and accept her wishes. Lin Baoyue had no choice but to live as Ying Baoyue. Embrace the wish of that child and live on. Ying Baoyue. The girl murmured the name softly, lifted her head, and finally glanced at the stars below. This is her future name. In the hinterland of the former Qin dynasty, deep in the Li Mountains, which had always been regarded as a forbidden area by the former Qin royal family, countless birds suddenly flew up in the dense primitive jungle. In a secluded cave in the deserted forest, a young girl walked out. She had a face full of black and gray, wearing a dress that was intricately crafted and out of size, resembling a burial object, and walked out step by step barefoot. And the cave behind her seemed to be alive, gradually disappearing into the jungle as she walked out. The girl turned her head and looked at it thoughtfully. Taking a deep breath, she barefoot stepped on the fallen soil and continued walking forward. Countless memories swirled in her mind, as she walked alone on a completely undeveloped land. Finally, at the peak of the sun, she collapsed to the ground. Another morning, as the first ray of dawn passed through the branches, a foraging sparrow jumped onto the shoulder of the figure covered in leaves. It pecked at the thing on the ground with concern and tilted its head in confusion. However, in the next moment, it fluttered up and rushed into the sky. Ha! Someone! A stunned male voice came, startling countless birds. The footsteps of a young man carrying a medicine basket stopped beside the girl buried in the leaves. Chapter 5. Youth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Consciousness sometimes seems to be soaked in warm water, sometimes buried in sticky mercury, and finally everything is burned by the flames, turning into a sharp pain engraved on the wrist. Pain pierces through the heart. There is only one sentence left in my ear, one obsession. You need to climb out of the abyss and live like a person. The sleeping girl clenched her wrist and suddenly opened her eyes. Ah! The tip of the nose is no longer the scent of decaying leaves and birds and animals in the mountains and forests. It is full of a pungent smell mixed with herbs. The reason why it is called pungent is because Lin Baoyue, who has become Ying Baoyue, was directly choked by this smell from her coma and coughed. Cough. Cough. Accompanied by her cough, a woman's surprised voice came from not far away. Chenner. Come on. She's awake. Lin Baoyue, who had changed her name to Ying Baoyue, opened her eyes and looked at the sound. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman's face appeared in front of her. She was lying on the bed in the corner of a room, and the woman was standing by her bed. The woman's gaze was gentle and loving, and her dignified every move showcased her good background. However, her drooping corners and fine lines also revealed some sadness. Seeing Ying Baoyue wake up, the woman seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and approached to help her up, but the next moment a cold young man's voice came from behind. Mother, please rest, I'll come. Ying Baoyue rolled her eyes and saw a tall and thin young man walking from behind the woman. He was thin and brown, with sword eyebrows and starry eyes. The lines of his face were extremely firm. Although he was 15 or 16 years old, his gaze was somewhat deep, as if he was full of worries. The boy held a bowl in his hand, and the unpleasant smell came from it. Ying Baoyue found that there seemed to be a consistent taste in her mouth. This is really the young man looked at Ying Baoyue who had woken up, his eyes not as happy as his mother's. He placed the bowl on the bedside table and looked at the weak young girl on the bed. A hint of youthful impatience flashed between his rebellious eyebrows and eyes. He took a deep breath and reluctantly reached out his hand. Then he helped me empty. The woman widened her eyes and stared blankly at the young girl sitting up on her own, propped up on the bed. The atmosphere was a bit awkward for a moment. Ying Baoyue felt a bit embarrassed as she looked at the boy's hand in mid-air. She seems to be sitting up too fast. After a pause, the young man quickly withdrew his hand, turned around and continued to pick up the bowl, frowning and looking at the girl sitting up. Ying Baoyue gave a bitter smile and looked up at the unfamiliar mother and son. This time, the young man and the woman were stunned. Just as Ying Baoyue was looking at them, the young man and woman were also looking at her. Although she looked at her face for 2 days, the feeling of the girl closing and opening her eyes was completely different. The young man in a short brown robe furrowed his brow. At the moment she looked over, his heart skipped a beat. Just like a peerless sword unsheathed. The girl sitting on the bed has a pair of clear eyes reminiscent of forests and lakes. After waking up, she was wrapped in an extremely special atmosphere. You. The young man hesitated for a moment as he looked at Ying Baoyue. However, before he could speak, the girl sitting at the bedside smiled at him slightly. Thank you for saving me. The boy squinted his eyes and said, how do you know I saved you? Would it be this reaction for a normal person to wake up from a coma and find themselves in an unfamiliar environment? Did you carry me back from the forest? Ying Baoyue smiled and looked down at the boy's feet. The soil on your feet is very similar to the color where I fell. The young man was startled and scalded to the point where he lifted his feet, staring wide at the dirt on the heel of his grass shoes. At the next moment, he put down his foot heavily and quickly frowned to look at the girl leaning against the bedside. The girl, who had just woken up with a weak face, could tell at a glance what he was not even aware of. The boy squinted his eyes and clenched the bowl in his hand. So I said before, brother, don't pick up things and go home, a cold female voice came from behind the young man. Ying Baoyue looked up and saw a young girl of 13 or 14 standing at the door, her voice sharp as if with thorns. I really picked up some trouble and came back, she said clear. How are you talking? The woman quickly turned around and scolded, I don't remember how my mother taught you not to save in the face of death. The girl snorted coldly and didn't turn her head. Mom, what can you teach us? She sarcastically looked around the simple interior and said, it's because of your weak heart, Mom, that we were driven to this place, right? The girl's words somehow pierced the woman's spot, and she was taken aback. Her eyes were mixed with feelings of regret, anger, and disappointment. The corners of her eyes turned red, but she seemed to be wary of the stranger behind her, desperately restraining her emotions. The girl at the door saw her mother's sad expression, and a hint of regret flashed in her big eyes. She leaned forward with her hand, but became angry again when she saw her mother's weak expression, which only wanted to wipe tears. Finally, she stomped her feet and ran away. Lear. The middle-aged woman reached out her hand, but didn't catch anything. As soon as she woke up, Ying Baoyue couldn't figure out a family dispute, but the boy in front of her turned around as if he had been accustomed to it for a long time. Mother, don't worry about her, the young man only glanced lightly at the door. She's already such a big person, and you can't control her anymore. The middle-aged woman let out a deep sigh and looked at Ying Baoyue on the bed, apologizing, the little woman's mischievous behavior has made this little lady laugh. Ying Baoyue shook her head and said, I want to thank this young master for his righteous actions. After all, not everyone has the courage to bring back a young girl who fainted alone in the deep mountains. She looked up at the young man, Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. The grace of saving lives is unforgettable. May I ask for the name of the benefactor? The grace of saving lives is beyond words. The young man gently shook his bowl of traditional Chinese medicine liquid and spoke lightly. Everyone is not a fool, I should have understood long ago, you. He stared deeply at the young girl in bed, then didn't start looking in the other direction and spoke coldly, a person like you, isn't it easy to die? Ying Baoyue followed his gaze and a familiar garment draped on the back of the chair caught her eye. It was the dress she casually pulled out of the burial objects when she walked out of the tomb. Ying Baoyue silently lowered her head and looked at her chest wearing another sleeping gown. The young man was stunned and realized something. Then he spoke as if he had been scalded, this is what my mother changed for you. He didn't change her clothes. Ying Baoyue looked up at him with some surprise and said, I didn't mean to ask that. This. is different from the reaction of the teenage girl who was expected to question and scream. He took a deep breath and calmed down. Anyway, your clothes are not something that ordinary people can wear. The young man's indifferent gaze seemed to reach the depths of Ying Baoyue's heart. I am Guichen, the eldest son of Guichang, the Grand Marshal of former Qin. He announced his name expressionlessly and looked into Ying Baoyue's eyes. I ask you, who are you? The boy's question echoed in the empty room, but Ying Baoyue sat in bed in a daze. Because the first thing she heard was not anything else, but those two words. Former Qin dynasty. The Qin in her memory, the Qin that unified the entire continent, had only one character, not two. Has the national name changed from Qin to former Qin? Empire, what happened? Chapter 6. Si Ming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If there were no major events that overturned the national destiny, the country's name could not have changed. What is all of this hush? Just as Ying Baoyue was immersed in her thoughts, her left wrist suddenly felt a sharp pain. She clenched her lips and tightly grasped her wrist. What's wrong with you? Do you still have any pain? A worried voice came from the middle-aged woman in her ear. No, maybe it's time to call her Guimu now. Until now, Ying Baoyue had not seen the father of the young man. Considering the words and actions of the indifferent girl, she felt that she should not call this woman Lady Gui. Just as Ying Baoyue hesitated to address her, the woman showed a friendly smile and voluntarily introduced herself. I am the mother of Guichen and the wife of the former Qin Grand Marshal, Mu Shi. Is it the legitimate wife and eldest son of the Grand Marshal de Sima is the pinnacle of a country's military position, with a rank higher than that of a general, and is a true first-class official. If this young man who claimed to be Guichen had not deceived her, even if there were some problems with the empire, he should still be a high-ranking nobleman. There is no need to wear grass shoes to go deep into the mountains and forests, and he and his mother and sister should not live there no matter what. Ying Baoyue looked around the empty room called Qualing and fully understood the meaning of Guichen's words just now, being driven to this place. The environment in which this woman and her children live is severely mismatched with their identities. Hiding her guess in her heart, Ying Baoyue shook her head at Mu Shi and said, Please take care of me, madam. I'm fine now. That's good, Mu Shi touched her chest with fear. You've been unconscious for 2 whole days, and no matter how Qin'er feeds you medicine, you won't wake up. Feeding medicine. Is that how the strange smell in her mouth came about? Mu looked pitifully at Ying Baoyue and said, Speaking of your little girl's family, why did she collapse alone in such a place? It's a long story to say why the scar on Ying Baoyue's wrist started to ache again, and she grabbed it and frowned, looking as if she was trying her best to think. What? Don't you remember? Mu Shi hurriedly spoke as she looked at the girl with a sudden pale face. Ying Baoyue looked at her worried gaze and nodded with a bitter smile. This is not a lie. If we want to investigate why she was in that place and trace the root cause, we need to figure out why she, as a young master in her previous life, was locked in that black coffin, but she really can't remember about this matter. Have you lost your memory? Guichen frowned tightly upon hearing this. I only remember being hit in the head from behind and waking up here. Ying Baoyue pondered for a moment and said slowly. This statement is not a lie, it is the first-hand experience of this little princess with a body. Well. Mu Shi's sympathy grew even stronger in her eyes, and she sighed, it's all because of this unstable world. If that adult is still here. Now the world is not peaceful because our Royal Highness Princess is unwilling to marry and has nothing to do with the witch. The girl with a voice mixed with ice appeared again at the door, speaking coldly. Kissing. A witch. Upon hearing these words, Ying Baoyue's heart skipped a beat, and the next moment the girl's word, which, made her frown even more. Lear. Mu's tone suddenly became stern, even though she had a good temper. What are you talking about again? I told you not to blindly believe in rumors outside. The girl snorted coldly and didn't turn her head away without speaking. This is my younger sister Gili, who is 13 years old and not very sensible. Her personality is a bit strange, Gui Chen said expressionlessly, handing the medicine bowl in her hand to Ying Baoyue. Is it Gili? This name is a bit, what? Where did I say wrong? The girl named Gili spoke coldly upon hearing her elder brother's introduction. There are rumors outside that the wedding princess has disappeared. It was our former Qin who betrayed our engagement. Now, let alone forming an alliance, Southern Chu happens to have a reason to declare war on us. The princess of the former Qin dynasty. I see. Does the two people who murdered the princess's clamor for selling girls and seeking honor refer to this engagement? But things shouldn't be that simple. A married princess sat on the bed, gazing at the dark edge of a bowl of traditional Chinese medicine liquid, silently pondering. So don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Gui Chen turned around and stared coldly at his sister. This is not that simple. Oh, there is indeed a hidden truth. The person who betrayed the engagement first was clearly from Southern Chu. The young man's eyes lit up with a ray of anger and he spoke loudly. Although our Daqin has fallen into the former Qin dynasty, the eldest royal highness princess is at least the granddaughter of the first emperor. Even if His Majesty orders him to marry, he is also married to the royal family of the Southern Chu state. The Southern Chu state treacherously pushed the engagement to a minister. How can we say that the former Qin state betrayed the engagement when it hurts the national system? It hurts the national physique. This is also what the two black-clothed men shouted when they killed the little princess. Ying Baoyue quickly sorted out this relationship. The marriage between countries is generally with the royal family, and there seems to be a problem with the object of marriage for Princess Ying. To reconcile with a vassal. What kind of marriage is this? Faced with Guichen's anger, Gili was much calmer. The girl scorned her brother's anger. Although the marriage object has changed, I don't know what our royal highness princess is dissatisfied with if she can marry Chunhua, one of the 6 sons of the Warring States period. Warring States' 6th young master. Chunhua Jun. Ying Baoyue on the bed squinted her eyes. An unheard of title. Of course, it could also be that she doesn't remember. It can be seen that Guichen, the younger sister, has a great liking for this Chunhua Jun. Gue Li sneered, when you are in such a field, your royal highness princess still clings to his identity and escapes the engagement with Chunhua king. Why is the son of the Southern Chu state master inferior to the son of the Southern Chu king? It seems that this Chunhua Jun is the son of the Southern Chu national teacher. It's strange that the marriage partner is not the prince but the son of the national teacher. However, I think the reason why you said that the royal highness princess escaped from marriage may not be because of identity, she simply encountered force majeure. Ying Baoyue on the bed silently gazed at her bickering siblings. You women know Chunhua Jun. He is not a royal son no matter how good he is. Your highness royal highness princess is marrying on behalf of the country. It is not a question of who to marry, it is a question of dignity. Guichen spoke excitedly, looking more energetic than before, but more like a 15-year-old boy. Chunhua Jun is the best young man in the whole Southern Chu. In fact, our royal highness princess is not worthy of him. Faced with Guichen's anger, Gue Li remained steadfast. The two of them argued like this, and the topic grew farther and farther away. Gradually, it shifted from the engagement between the two countries to the concept of choosing a partner for men and women, and then to the overall situation of the world. Should we say that they are truly worthy of being the children of Decima? When it comes to talking, these siblings are truly free from taboos. Watching the siblings arguing incessantly based on classics, Ying Baoyue couldn't help but marvel at the authenticity of this sibling relationship. However, as she listened, her gaze deepened. Because, through their arguments, combined with her past life memories and the memories of the original owner's body, she finally learned the truth about this world. That is to say, the great Qin Empire, which once unified the entire continent, no longer exists. 8 years have passed since the death of Emperor Taizu, Emperor Ying, and her previous life as a minor official was sealed in the tomb of Emperor Taizu. And these 8 years have been earth-shattering. The second generation was the last emperor of the Qin Empire. Less than 2 years after the death of Emperor Taizu, 7 years ago, the youngest son of Emperor Ying, the heir of Emperor Taizu, passed away unexpectedly. The Qin Empire established by Emperor Taizu collapsed, greatly reducing its national power and prestige, and ultimately collapsed into an ordinary feudal state, becoming the former Qin. The 5 feudal states granted by Emperor Taizu gained independence, along with the collapsed former Qin and the western Rong outside the Yongye Great Wall, forming 7 countries. Donggu, Yuyu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net Southern Chu, Western Rong, Northern Wei, former Qin, later Liao, and Middle Tang. The 7 Kingdoms War brings another chaotic era. The entire mountain and sea continent has regressed in history and entered the Warring States period again. This is the world now. The trigger for everything started from the day Emperor Ying Hao died on the Great Wall. The reason for the accidental death of Emperor Ying Hao, the second emperor, was the cause of all of this. Don't argue anymore, let this girl see a joke. Mu interrupted the siblings who were arguing and looked at Ying Baoyue. With the blessings of the Empress Dowager, you have finally woken up. Mother. Geely looked at her mother incredulously, when has it been since you mentioned that witch? The girl's voice was like a heavy stone hitting Ying Baoyue's heart. Si Ming. With this title, memories surged towards her like a tide. Si Ming. This is the name of God, but in this world it refers to a person. He was once the first person to ascend to the realm of gods as a human being, and was revered by all Qin people. She is also the mentor who raised Shao Siming Lin Baoyue, taught and received education, and is the person she admires the most in her heart. Her master. Si Ming, Lin Shubai. However, as she returns to this world today. It's all because of that witch that we have this chaotic world today. The sharp shout of the girl made Ying Baoyue feel like she was struck by lightning. People living now tell her. The death of the second generation of the great Qin dynasty was due to the last emperor being tempted by the demon goddess, the Grand Marshal, and setting fire to the Yongye Great Wall for fun, ultimately being shot dead by the Western cavalry outside the Great Wall. Everything. It's all because of that woman. Chapter 7. Prohibition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There is no consensus on what happened on the Great Wall. Gui Chen's words interrupted Ying Baoyue's thoughts. He frowned and looked at his sister, speaking with a mature voice. Don't just believe the one-sided words of those immortal officials in the court. Immortal officials. Ying Baoyue squinted her eyes. She still remembers that this was another official system that once existed in the Qin Empire. A system of officials born for practitioners. And practitioners, anyway, whether it's a one-sided statement or not, that woman died with the late emperor on the Great Wall of Eternal Night, Geely said coldly, giving Ying Baoyue a fatal blow as she struggled to recall. Master. Died. The powerful and omnipotent master who helped Emperor Ying unite the whole land with the 8 gods and created great achievements died. Even though her memory had not fully recovered and she couldn't even recall her past with her master, Ying Baoyue felt a piercing pain from the depths of her soul. Pain pierces through the heart, there is no turning back. What's wrong with you? Guichen's voice rang in Ying Baoyue's ear, which was blurry in consciousness. Ying Baoyue tightly grasped her wrist, suppressed the sweetness in her throat, and raised her head, revealing a pale smile to the young man. I'm fine. Guichen frowned and said, if you're not feeling well, don't laugh. It makes people look uncomfortable. He looked uncomfortable. Ying Baoyue was stunned for a moment, then quietly held the bowl and lowered her head, looking at her face reflected on the medicine. Hurry up and drink the medicine while it's hot, Guichen continued coldly. Ying Baoyue stared at the bowl for 3 seconds and pressed her lips against the edge of the bowl. Hey, brother, what medicine have you prepared? Is it okay to give it to people like this? Suddenly, a voice from Gili came from beside me. Ying Baoyue, who was drinking medicinal juice, unexpectedly turned her head and saw a hint of worry in the girl's eyes. It seems that I know her brother's craftsmanship very well. Tasting the medicinal juice in her mouth, Ying Baoyue laughed in her heart. I see, the child is not that bad in nature. I boiled it strictly according to the formula in the pharmacopoeia, how could there be any problems? Guichen said in defiance of his sister's questioning. Pharmacopoeia. Ying Baoyue put down the empty bowl she had drunk, which is another familiar name. The Origin of Practitioners, the initial guide book, Pharmacopoeia. How do you feel after drinking? Looking at the empty bowl in the girl's hand, Guichen's eyes sparkled like a beast seeing its prey. How does my medicine work? Ying Baoyue turned her head and looked at the young man with expectant eyes. In order to ensure the safety of more people's lives, she finally decided to be honest. Not much. Ying Baoyue thought for a moment and honestly said, if you put an extra amount of hookworm in this medicine, you can poison me to death. Guichen and Mu were stunned. And Gili on the side covered her eyes as if she had anticipated. How do you know? Wait, why are you still drinking? It took the young man a long time to realize, and the next moment he suddenly remembered something even more terrifying and asked in shock. There is indeed hooked vine in this medicine. He studied it for a long time during preparation, but what is even more frightening is not that the girl drank it in one gulp, but that she drank it without any psychological barriers. What kind of person is this? Faced with the young man's stunned questions, the girl sitting at the bedside was very calm. I can't cure my illness, but it's still possible to lower the fire, Ying Baoyue said calmly. The prescriptions in the pharmacopoeia, except for some that require rare treasures, she remembered that they were mostly peaceful prescriptions. In other words, it's something that fools outsiders. Generally, it doesn't kill or cure people. Of course, this young man's cooking method is exceptionally poor, and it is obvious that he has self-taught without receiving specialized guidance. But it's also a kind gesture. Anyway, if you can't drink it to death, just treat it as tea, Ying Baoyue said as she looked at the young man Guichen who had stiffened into a statue in front of her. Now, Gili, who had been staring at her in the wrong eye, was stunned and widened his eyes. What kind of women are these? Gili frowned and sighed as she looked at Ying Baoyue sitting on the bed. Little sister, don't speak in this tone at your age. Ying Baoyue looked at her speechlessly, put the empty bowl back at the head of the bed, looked at Guichen standing stiffly in front of the bed, sat up straight, and made a formal bow. Guichen's whole body trembled slightly. Thank you again for saving me, said the girl sitting at the bedside with a pale face and graceful movements that were unimaginable. Thank you, Guichen. The young man was once again stunned. And Mu Shi was slightly stunned as he watched the girl's movements and behavior. Cough, the next moment, the boy coughed as if to ease his embarrassment. He spoke in a deep voice, you don't need to thank me, this is a part of my cultivation. Do you practice? Ying Baoyue gazed thoughtfully at the young man with an unyielding gaze that did not match his age. And Guichen's originally stunned gaze once again became cold. Change back to the cold young man you first saw. Whether it's saving you or feeding you medicine, it's all for myself, he said coldly. So you don't have to thank me, even hate me. He pursed his lips and said, after all, I just tried your medicine too. Chenner. Mu Shi beside couldn't see it anymore, frowning as she looked at her awkward eldest son. Can I try the medicine? She remembers it. There is this way of cultivation. Ying Baoyue looked at the empty bowl by the bedside. Guichen reached out to put away the porcelain bowl and closed his eyes, waiting for the girl's anger, fear, and scream. Although feeding her was currently my most confident prescription, it seems that I still put her in danger. In the eyes of a normal woman, I didn't take her life seriously at all. However, the scream he had anticipated did not come, and a cold and clear sound as clear as a spring came from Guichen's ear. So, Gui Gongzi, do you want to become a practitioner? With a snap, the porcelain bowl in Guichen's hand fell to the ground. I fell and shattered. Mu's mother and daughter stared blankly at the young girl who had just woken up by the bedside, and a strong guard rose in the girl's eyes as she returned. But at this moment, Guichen calmed down. The young man crouched down to pick up the broken porcelain pieces while speaking faintly. You said you lost your memory, is that really a lie? Ying Baoyue shook her head and said, I usually don't lie. There are many things that I don't remember, but as I listen to you talking, I gradually think of something. I used to seem to have heard about cultivators. Well, the boy stood up and looked at her. Since that's the case, it's not something to hide. That's right, he nodded calmly. I want to become a practitioner. The young man looked around his sister and mother, his eyes burning with flames. I want to become a practitioner and change my destiny. Let my sister and mother live a better life. Ying Baoyue stared blankly at the young man in front of her who expressed her aspirations, and countless emotions stirred up in her heart. Practitioners. The most unique existence on the mountains, seas, and continents. The story of Emperor Taizu unifying the mainland actually has sequels. Emperor Ying traveled south and north to search for gods and established a cultivation system to communicate with them. In the end, he found 8 gods in this continent and received their help. As the first emperor of Qin, Emperor Taizu, he unified the continent. After unification, Emperor Taizu granted 5 feudal lords and established the Great Wall of Eternal Night to resist nomadic tribes. At the same time, under the cultivation system he established, more and more practitioners emerged. Practitioners can communicate with heaven and earth, regulate the climate, and influence wars. The national teachers of each feudal state are undertaken by top practitioners. Yuyu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net. Each feudal state has its own deity of faith, and practitioners are unique beings who communicate with the deities and heaven and earth. The top practitioners themselves will be revered as gods. For example, Ying Baoyue's mentor, Grand Minister Lin Shubai. So, as an elderly person in the state of Qin, the Mu family blurted out the phrase, the Si Ming Nyang Nyang Yu. And practitioners who are comparable to gods are all achieved through step-by-step cultivation. Wait, how many levels are there in the cultivator system created by Emperor Taizu? Ying Baoyue frowned while recalling. Why does she not remember the most crucial way of becoming a practitioner in terms of cultivation? There seemed to be some force deep in her mind that was preventing her from remembering these things. Ying Baoyue pressed down on the painful temple and looked up at Guichen. Since you want to become a practitioner, you should know the specific level system of practitioners, right? Can you tell me? What are you asking about this? Guichen frowned and looked at Ying Baoyue coldly. You may have amnesia, as if you don't know, but Guichen spoke solemnly and coldly, announcing the common sense of people in this world. Women do not become practitioners. Ying Baoyue was taken aback, but for the first time, Gili beside Guichen nodded helplessly and in agreement with her brother's words. Female cultivators are the root cause of a country's chaos and loss of control. The young man's gaze was gloomy. The entire mountain, sea, and continent cannot accept women as cultivators now, even at the lowest level. At least after the incident with the Grand Minister. Guichen stared deeply at Ying Baoyue and spoke word by word. Women become practitioners. The young man is resolute and resolute. Absolutely impossible. Chapter 8. Practice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Absolutely impossible. The young man, who cut off gold and iron, naturally said this sentence. It seems like talking about common sense that everyone knows. I see, it can't be. Looking at the girl sitting on the bed in a daze, Guichen let out a breath. He felt that his tone was heavy enough. No matter what kind of background this strange girl had, this truth should also be understood. He used to feel a bit unfriendly, but as he grew up, he increasingly felt that this ban was not a problem. After all, women should stay where they should be. Even if it's not for evil, those special women themselves are the root cause of trouble. After all, as long as a witch is born, it is enough to destroy a country. Who can bear such consequences? Women should not be allowed to enter special fields. For example, in the court, in the realm close to the gods. I see. Looking at the young man in front of him with somewhat disgusted yet determined eyes, Ying Baoyue spoke calmly. The cultivation system established by Emperor Taizu, who was once talented and strategic, was actually not perfect. It left a loophole. That's why it leaves the only possibility for women to become officials. The imperial examination system established by Emperor Taizu strictly prohibited women from participating in the selection of officials for ordinary officials. However, in addition to the civil and military officials, Qin also had another official system. Ministry of Prayer, Ministry of Rights, Immortal Officials. That is the immortal official system. The immortal official system is closely related to the level of cultivators. As long as the cultivator's level is high enough, there is a possibility of becoming an immortal official. The level of a practitioner is not related to gender. As long as the level of a female practitioner is high enough, the court cannot ignore her existence. This is a loophole. But there is a loophole in Emperor Ying's heart that he lacks spare power. Because during his lifetime, he was the pinnacle of immortality and the national teacher who made great contributions to the Qin Empire by praying to the provincial governor. She was a woman. Si Ming, Lin Baoyue. Anyway, it's good that you know. The world is already chaotic enough, and women cannot become cultivators. Don't think recklessly anymore. Guichen's words rang in Ying Baoyue's ear again, but the next moment the young man's words paused. Because the girl sitting at the head of the bed lifted her head and quietly looked at him. Under those clear and transparent eyes, the young man suddenly felt a chill on his back. The next moment, the girl sitting at the head of the bed watched him speak quietly. It's not that one cannot become a practitioner, is it not allowed to become a practitioner? What Guichen stared at the young girl with a peaceful voice that gave him an inexplicable sense of oppression. After all, His Highness the Grand Minister is a woman, isn't she? Ying Baoyue smiled as she looked at Guichen. So it seems that women are not incapable of cultivation. It's not that one cannot practice, but rather that one is not allowed to practice. The existence that originally inspired women to become immortal officials has now become known as witches in people's mouths, completely blocking the possibility of women becoming immortal officials. This is the current world. The real world. That's different. The kind-hearted woman bit her lip as she didn't expect Mu to speak this time. That empress is the reincarnation of the goddess Nuwa, it's special, and other women can never be her. The reincarnation of the female snail god. Is she playing games? Why doesn't she have such a memory? She doesn't remember that unscrupulous master telling her that she still has such a magical background. Ying Baoyue looked at Mu Shi in shock, and the next moment Guichen stood in front of his mother. Don't listen to my mother's nonsense. She is also old, so why do you believe in the Grand Master? Anyway, that person is different from other women. If you want to live in this country, don't mention her. Are witches and gods. It doesn't sound like a person no matter what. In this way, layers of hats are fastened to conceal a woman's identity and gender, making her no longer her, nor a human. No woman dares to imitate. If it were a normal woman in this world. Ying Baoyue lowered her head slightly, looked at her tightly held wrist, and spoke faintly, regarding the previous practitioner system, I just want to understand, maybe it can help me restore some memories. In today's world, if a woman wants to become a practitioner, it seems she needs to confront the whole world. If you don't want to die, probably not many women would try. What she needs now is to first restore her physical strength and memory, as too many mysteries exist in her heart. Is that right? Gui Chen looked at Ying Baoyue, who seemed to have become obedient sitting at the bedside, and spoke with half a doubt. Okay, I can tell you, but I don't know everything. Practitioners are extremely mysterious beings on this continent, and relevant information is priceless. The cultivation methods are also kept secret from various schools. The only thing ordinary people can know is the beginner's level, and as for the intermediate level and the unattainable high level, they can only know when they climb up. The young man frowned and spoke. Ying Baoyue nodded. The practitioner system has a total of 10 levels, although it can be said to be 10 levels, the 10th level is only a threshold for entry. Gui Chen took a deep breath and opened his mouth. This threshold is the distance between ordinary people and practitioners. And he is stuck at this threshold. The 10th to 7th stages are the initial stages, also known as the human stage, the 6th to 4th stages are the intermediate stages, also known as the earth stage, and the 3rd to 1st stages. The young man Gui Chen's eyes were tinged with a hint of reverence. It's called Shangjia, also known as Tianjia. A reasonable division between heaven, earth, and humanity. Ying Baoyue continued to nod. Gui Chen glanced at her and continued to speak. The 10th level is called Divine Doctor. Oh, doctor. I see, I actually want to become a doctor first. This way of cultivation is really unique. Ying Baoyue thought to herself. No wonder Gui Chen wanted to test her medicine. This young man is stuck here, right? The 9th level is called Divine Beast. The young man glanced at Ying Baoyue and explained, mainly for taming divine beasts. Oh, the keeper. Fortunately, it wasn't that humans turned into beasts. Ying Baoyue felt increasingly strange in her heart, always feeling that there seemed to be something wrong with this cultivation method. The 8th level is called Shenwu. Gui Chen's eyes showed infinite longing. At this stage, it is said that one can use divination to enter the earth and master the power of the earth's veins, thereby obtaining extremely high military power. Finally reaching the point of strength, but it seems different from what I know about divination. The 7th level, the Divine Star. The young man in front of him opened his mouth and became fluent. Legend has it that one can obtain the power of the stars through astrology, predict the future, and obtain more powerful weapons. Is there still something wrong with it? Does astrology still have this function? Having finished speaking at the beginner's level, that's all I know, Gui Chen said regretfully, but the next moment the young man eagerly spoke up, but I know the name of the 5th level of the intermediate level. Mid-level, or the 5th level sounds very powerful. After all, the so-called cultivation path is usually a watershed halfway through, and the 7th level of the 1st level is already searching for stars in the sky. Ying Baoyue is curious about what the 5th level of the middle level can do. What is it? Divine Dance. Gui Chen said excitedly. Divine Dance. This is another magical name. Are you going to dance? Combining previous divination and astrology, Ying Baoyue suddenly had a bold idea in his heart. Oh, jumping big. Shouldn't it be possible? Ying Baoyue suppressed the scene that popped up in her mind and said, what can be done specifically? I don't know about that, Gui Chen lowered his head in frustration. Damn it, if I could meet a few cultivators. Although the young man was disappointed, Ying Baoyue's mind was filled with strange images. As a doctor, as a caretaker, and also looking at the stars, divining and farming, I cannot enter the land following this trend. She always felt that the middle ranks behind would be those who sell singing and dancing. By the way, at this moment, Gui Chen, who had originally lowered his head in despair, suddenly lifted his head and gazed into Ying Baoyue's eyes. Although I don't know the middle level, I also know the names of the higher level, which is the 2nd and 1st levels of the heavenly level. It's better to say that the entire mountain, sea, and continent, whether or not practitioners, know. This is not the secret of cultivation, but the common sense of the world. The highest level practitioners are closely related to everyone. The atmosphere in this room became solemn, and Gili and Mu's gaze also became respectful. The second stage is. Guichen spoke in a low voice, while Ying Baoyue, sitting at the head of the bed, suddenly lifted her head. This. She knows. The next moment, she spoke up with Guichen at the same time and said the name. Divine Child. Do you know? Guichen looked at Ying Baoyue in surprise and suddenly spoke up the next moment. Yes, after all, no matter how hard you lose memory, you should know this common sense about demigods. No, it's not because of common sense. Because she used to be. Shenzi, also known as the demigod, is the pinnacle of worldly practitioners. It is said that the existence of Tongshan is the highest level that only 8 people have reached in the history of the entire continent. There are only 8 equivalent levels in the mainland. Legend has it that the 8 gods, the national teacher of each feudal state, can only be born by the divine son. As an honor that only the supreme cultivator can possess, once a cultivator reaches level 2, they can receive a title. Among the 8 gods, there is such a title. Its name is Shao Siming. Goddess, young master of destiny. Originally, there was no semi-divine term for this rank, it was just called the Son of God, which is what we call the Son of God. A man who has already become divine is naturally referred to as a divine son. But once there was a woman who told the world that it was not only the Son of God who could communicate with God. God will also have daughters. That woman broke free from the realm that originally only existed for men. And after her, a second woman appeared. Level 2 is no longer within the realm of the divine son. She is the second woman to break this taboo. The Siming's disciple, Shao Siming, who had already reached the second rank at the age of only 17, once again told the world the power of goddesses in this world. And as for the first woman who broke the taboo, her life is even more brilliant and brilliant. Ying Baoyue lifted her head and the moonlight outside hit her through the window. Half-gods are not the pinnacle of practitioners. There is a special existence among the 8 gods, which is the only one of equal rank. And the name of the first rank is. Guichen's voice rang out again, and Ying Baoyue and he looked at each other and said the name. Human beings and gods. The so-called 8 gods are just a collective term. In fact, there has only been one person in this continent who has truly reached the realm of human gods throughout history. Yu reading www.yuukeungshu.net. Only one person in this world has ever reached level 1. That is the head of the 8 gods, the pinnacle of the half-gods, and the national teacher of the great Qin Empire. Human beings and gods, great masters of destiny. Lin Shubai. Sure enough, you remember to wait for step 1, Guichen wiped a sweat off his forehead and breathed a long sigh of relief. So, did you remember anything? Ying Baoyue nodded. She did remember something. Speaking of which, she said casually, I just remembered that you said before that Si Ming was a unique person and god, but it seems that there is still a demigod who is female. Ying Baoyue just wanted to test it out. After all, the 8 people god is also a common sense figure, so it shouldn't be much to talk about casually. But the mother and daughter of Gui suddenly widened their eyes as if they had heard something very terrifying. This unexpected reaction gradually lowered Ying Baoyue's voice. What is that young master's name? At the next moment, Mu's exclamation of surprise shook Ying Baoyue's whole body. What's going on? You can't mention Shao Siming. The originally gentle woman's face was full of fear. Those who believed in Shao Siming have been taken away and never come back. And the girl Gili glared at her with fear in her eyes. The entire Eastern Wu Kingdom is offering a reward for Shao Siming. Why? Ying Baoyue instinctively asked. As Gili was about to answer, her older brother Guichen stood in front of her and spoke solemnly to Ying Baoyue. Because she lost the deity that the Eastern Wu Kingdom originally believed in. What is it? Ying Baoyue was completely confused. What does losing a god have to do with me? Chapter 9. Lost God. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. It's not that Ying Baoyue is confused, but rather that this matter is too big. There are a total of 8 gods who helped Emperor Taizu unify the mountains, seas, and continents to establish the Qin Empire. These 8 gods are also the oldest 8 ancient gods on the mountain, sea, and continent. After the unification of the Qin Empire, different feudal states had their own belief totems according to their regions. Although one of them encountered problems in the later stage, ultimately leading to the failure of the unification of Shirong, as a powerful ancient god with the same lifespan as heaven, these 8 totem gods are the most top-notch beings on the mountain and sea continent, truly the supreme gods. The names of the 8 gods are Qinglong, Zhuke, Baihu, Xuanwu, Tingsha, Baigo, Yinglong, and Gaochen, also known as Qilin. Because these 8 deities are all animal-shaped totems, they are also known as the 8 beast gods. They are the true gods of heaven, and the so-called 8 gods are completely different from each other. It can be said that the so-called 8 gods are at best only servants of the 8 totems in the mortal world. Of course, under normal circumstances. Ying Baoyue thought to herself. There are always accidents, so let's not mention them here for now. In short, since it is a deity believed in by a country, there is no doubt that it is one of the 8 most powerful totem beast gods in the world. And among the gods, there are also 3, 6, 9 levels. This world is so realistic. Ying Baoyue thought of the knowledge she had just recalled in her mind and felt a headache splitting her spine. Good God, why are you still making such a reality? However, in folklore, there is indeed a level difference between the 8 gods. The yellow map of the 3 assistants states. The 4 spirits of heaven, including the green dragon, white tiger, vermilion sparrow, and Xuanwu, are formed in all directions. The king is responsible for constructing palaces, and pavilions to obtain the Dharma. This means that as the 4 symbols of heaven, the status and power of the 4 gods of blue dragon, vermilion bird, white tiger, and Xuanwu are higher than those of the other 4 deities. Ting snake, Go Chen, Bai Go, and Ying Long are tied, ranking below the 4 elephants. That is, the 2nd level god. However, this is not over yet. The 3rd volume of Huainanzi records. Those who are precious to the gods are not more precious than Qinglong. Therefore, Qinglong is the head of the 4 symbols. If Ying Baoyue remembers correctly, the deities originally believed in by the Eastern Wu kingdom located in the east of the mainland, it's this expensive and even more expensive Qinglong. And now someone is telling me that the most powerful and mysterious deity on this continent has been lost. Or was it because she lost it? Is this teasing her? At this moment, Ying Baoyue's outlook on life, worldview, and values, abbreviated as the 3 views, were all challenged. Are you okay? Guichen frowned and asked as she watched Ying Baoyue sit in bed, frozen into a statue. Ying Baoyue smiled bitterly. She was fine, but Shao Siming was very busy. Although she doesn't remember anything, this statement is always strange. How can a god be lost? She has never heard of a god being able to be lost in her 3 lifetimes. What kind of magical statement is this? Is this a child? It seems that your amnesia is quite serious. Guichen frowned and looked at her mature. I don't remember such a big thing. I don't know, I don't even know about this matter, Guichen said with a serious tone. Then you have to be careful, otherwise you won't know how to die if you say the wrong thing and touch the taboo. I really don't know how I died in my previous life. Alright, since they don't remember, hurry up and explain to the girl carefully. Finally, Mu Shi came out to make amends, but the kind-hearted woman was very serious at this moment, sighing as she looked at Ying Baoyue. Miss, I don't know how much you remember about things in this world. Mu Shi looked at Ying Baoyue anxiously and asked. Have you heard of the fact that Lord Qinglong no longer appeared in the world 18 years ago? Ying Baoyue clenched her wrist, as if she had a slight impression of it. It is indeed very famous. After all, it's about totem gods. After the unification of the mainland by Emperor Taizu, it is said that the most powerful Qinglong god was consumed excessively and no longer exhibited miracles. The immortal officials of the great Qin state said that it had entered dormancy. If something unexpected happens to the most powerful deity, there will definitely be a celestial anomaly. Since there is no such thing, everyone has accepted this official statement. But after that, Ying Baoyue's memory became somewhat blurry and seemed to be missing in some places. Everyone thinks that Lord Qinglong is just sleeping somewhere, and according to the Eastern Wu immortal officer, one can also feel the breath, Mu continued, her words being no different from what Ying Baoyue remembered. But for some reason, Ying Baoyue still felt a slight sense of discord in her heart. It seems that she has forgotten something crucial. However, just as she was desperately reminiscing, Mu's voice twitched, and the next moment Guichen's cold voice filled in. However, just 8 years ago, the young man continued coldly, an apocalypse suddenly appeared over the land of the founder of Eastern Wu, and large black clouds gathered in the shape of dragons. The dark clouds turned into falling thunder, and lightning tore up the dragon-shaped dark clouds and destroyed them. At the moment when the dragon-shaped clouds dissipated, the immortal officials completely lost the aura of the green dragon god. The boy's voice was eerie and icy. Can you imagine that the last dissipated cloud actually merged into 3 words? Ying Baoyue stared blankly at Guichen, listening as he uttered the last sentence from his mouth. The 3 words combined are Shao Siming. Disappearing deities, torn totems, and names that seem to roar with the last breath. Accompanied by the boy's deep narration, Ying Baoyue's eyes seemed to conjure up the scene of the end of the world. It is not surprising how such an intense and ominous scene, coupled with the sudden loss of breath of a deity, would be interpreted. 8 years ago. It was the year she died in her previous life. Later, according to the interpretation of the immortal officials of the Eastern Wu Kingdom, the Qinglong God Lord should have been temporarily lost. Guili flashed out from behind her brother, sarcastically repairing his sword. It's not so much an interpretation as an excuse to appease the people's hearts. Ying Baoyue took a slight breath. If she were an immortal official, that's all she could say. It can't be said that the head of the 4 heavenly gods just died like this. That will shake the hearts of the people. The national teachers of the Eastern Wu Kingdom also cannot escape their responsibility. The Eastern Wu Kingdom is now worshipping Yinglong, but has been searching for the Qinglong God Lord. Guili narrowed his eyes, and the culprit who caused it. The little girl said with great disgust, that young master. Hello, hey, this statement. Guichen frowned as he looked at her, I remember. What do you remember? Guili sneered, the apocalypse is clearly like this. What's there to argue against? Even if she disappeared half a year earlier, hasn't her body been found all along? Who knows where she's hiding? Well, Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. She's under the Qin Emperor's mausoleum. Among all the cultivators, only a certain Grand Preceptor denied that the matter of the Qinglong god had nothing to do with the young preceptor. Guili gave a sharp smile. But can you still believe that witch's words? Not to mention that His Highness the young preceptor is still her disciple. Master, Ying Baoyue's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this, but at the same time, she felt a hint of warmth. No matter what happens. Her master believed in her. Always believe in her. So, what exactly is the truth? Recalling the sense of discord that seemed to have been dug out by life, Ying Baoyue's gaze sharpened. Everything happened in the year she died in her previous life. Is this a coincidence? The totem god is related to the national fortune of a country, and it is not an ordinary charge to make the whole country kill her before moving on. Alright, you two, stop arguing. This is not something that can be determined by you two kids arguing here. Mu Shi reached out and separated the 2 siblings who were going to argue again. The woman, who had experienced countless vicissitudes, let out a faint sigh. This is the unsolved mystery of the entire world. The person who can be untied should no longer be in this world. Okay, I have nothing to say to you either. Geely turned his back to his brother, and Guichen didn't show any weakness. With a swoop, he turned his attention to Ying Baoyue, who was thoughtful on the bed. Hey, the discussion about current affairs came to an end, and the boy frowned again as he looked at the beautiful girl, recalling a crucial question. You said you have amnesia, do you remember your name? The young man's bright and lively eyes stared tightly at the girl sitting on the bed like arrows. What's your name? Chapter 10. Names. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Name. Upon hearing the young man's question, Ying Baoyue was taken aback. This is an inevitable question, but she cannot answer truthfully. No matter which identity she possesses, it seems that it cannot be expressed now. Princess Ying Baoyue of the former Qin dynasty is being searched for by the entire former Qin dynasty, while Shao Siming Lin Baoyue is being chased by the entire Eastern Wu dynasty. If there is a bounty, her current head is probably very valuable. What? No, you don't even remember your own name. Guichen looked at the girl who was silent on the bed and widened his eyes in disbelief. Ying Baoyue apologized in her heart and looked up at him with a bitter smile. I can't say it. She remembers this, but she really can't say it. Can't even remember your name. Guili looked at Ying Baoyue with even more disdain, and Guichen sighed silently. Not to mention anything else, how do people call you? Do you still remember your surname? Ying Baoyue shook her head, pondered for a moment, and suddenly smiled as she looked at Guichen. Since it was the young master who brought me back, let him give me a name, she said, let my brother name you. Geely suddenly widened his eyes, and Mu's expression was also somewhat strange. Guichen froze even more upon hearing the words. Did she say anything strange? Ying Baoyue glanced at the young man's slightly red ears and frowned slightly, asking, can't we? Looking at the girl's clear eyes, Guichen was stunned for a moment. He lifted his hand and coughed, restoring his cold expression. It's not a big deal, he said, it's just a title. After speaking, the young boy pressed his hand against his chin and began to ponder with a serious expression. Ying Baoyue looked at him with great interest, and she was quite curious about what name this young man who had just met today would give her. You. Guichen looked up in deep contemplation, only to see the young girl quietly staring at him in the moonlight. Quiet, yet with an indescribable gaze. She seems to be there watching you all the time, yet she seems to be leaving the next second. The bright moon. Guichen suddenly spoke out with a strange and mysterious expression. What? Ying Baoyue was stunned for a moment, then asked with a smile. Guili and Mu Shi were both stunned at the words, but then a thoughtful look appeared in their eyes. Has anyone ever told you that sometimes you are like the moon? Guichen stared at Ying Baoyue and said. The moon. Ying Baoyue was taken aback for a moment, but the cheerful laughter of a woman from a long time ago rang in her ear. Holding you is like holding a moon, let's call you, holding the moon. Ying Baoyue closed her eyes, then clenched her left wrist, smiled, and looked up. Really, the girl spoke softly, I can't remember clearly. So, Guichen frowned as he looked at her eyes, and soon his eyebrows relaxed. Anyway, let's call you Mingyue. Bright moon. Ying Baoyue repeated. Yes, Mingyue, the young man nodded heavily, I will call you Mingyue from now on. Okay, Ying Baoyue nodded. Mu also showed a approving smile, and the atmosphere inside the room was very harmonious for a moment, but the sharp voice of Geely once again disrupted this calmness. The little girl's gaze wandered suspiciously before Ying Baoyue and Guichen, her head spinning to making Baoyue worried about her neck. The next moment, Geely stared at Ying Baoyue and spoke. Brother, you don't really plan to leave this woman of unknown origin at home, do you? Guichen was stunned when he heard this. Gili looked at Ying Baoyue with increasingly unfriendly eyes and questioned loudly, "Didn't we say before that the good person would wake up and let her go?" Lear. Mu Shi looked at her disapprovingly. "Miss Mingyue will wake up soon, and her memory. I thought she could ask her family when she woke up, but who knows, this guy doesn't remember anything," Guichen interrupted Mu's faint voice. "But I definitely won't let her stay here forever." The young man looked up at his mother and said, "Mom, I know you're kind. It doesn't matter if you used to, but our current situation doesn't allow us to take anyone in casually." Guichen raised his head and pointed his chin towards the east for some reason. "The people over there are probably coming soon," he said. "Over there." The boy's voice was low and heavy, not suitable for his age. Ying Baoyue raised her head slightly and looked at the familiar and cold yet unwilling expression in her eyes again. Situation. Upon hearing her son's words, Mu's whole body trembled. The wrinkles under her originally worried eyes deepened. She let out a deep sigh and struggled to speak in pain, "But I can't. Can't we throw out such a girl who has no eyes, hands, or iron?" Guichen knew what his mother wanted to say and looked at the girl in bed with furrowed brows. "Humph, who told you not to think clearly and pick up a useless woman?" Guili let out a cold snort as he looked at his brother's annoyed expression, then hugged his hands and said. Upon hearing this, Guichen's forehead became angry and he said, "You girl. That." Just as the two siblings were about to argue, a calm voice sounded. "What?" The two siblings turned their heads at the same time. I saw the girl sitting on the bed, who was being discussed about whether to stay or not, but with a calm expression, she raised her hand. I said, "I'm not living in vain." Ying Baoyue, sitting on the bed, smiled softly as she looked at her two siblings who were staring at her closely. "Not in vain." Gili sneered sarcastically, "Can you still give money?" "She knows it." The woman who was carried back by her elder brother from the deep mountains and forests was penniless. Although her clothes were well made, special clothing and jewelry were the most troublesome things. The more precious and rare they were, the more they could not be pawned. Although she is only 13 years old, this world has already taught her a lot. In an extremely cruel way. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. Otherwise, she and her brother and mother wouldn't have fallen to this. "I really don't have money," Ying Baoyue smiled. Gili sneered, "Then why don't you?" However, before she could speak harshly, Ying Baoyue smiled slightly at the broken bowl in Guichen's hand. "But I can give your brother a trial medication." "Hey!" As soon as Guichen was about to speak, he was blocked and his heart trembled as he looked at the girl who remained motionless. "I think for your brother now, this is an opportunity that no money can buy." Ying Baoyue smiled. "That's right." Guichen clenched the porcelain in his hand and almost pierced into his flesh. To become a divine doctor, one cannot do without patience. But those neighbors who knew his background were all tested by him, and his craftsmanship was also well known to everyone. Not to mention that someone would come to him for treatment. Now even the poorest people who are in need of money have no one willing to pay him to have their medicine tested. Just, how did she know? Guichen stared tightly at the woman who had only awakened today but had found her pain point with great precision and couldn't speak. "Okay," Guichen suddenly waved his hand before his sister could interject. "Brother." "But it's just temporary." Guichen ignored Gue Li's resistance and stared into Ying Baoyue's eyes. "When your stamina is almost restored, hurry up and leave." Ying Baoyue nodded. "But where else can she go?" Looking at the skinny Gue siblings, she still had a question in her heart. "Our family cannot afford to support idle people." The cries of Gili echoed in her ears. The legitimate children of the first-class officials of the great Qin dynasty have unexpectedly fallen into such a situation. What kind of secrets does this country, this return home, have?